Fernando Mendoza's NFL future is being debated intensely right now across every NFL, front office, and scouting department in the league. And according to sources who've been in the rooms where these discussions are happening, the answer to whether he'll be a star depends on one critical factor that has nothing to do with his arm talent or his football IQ. Which team drafts him and whether they have the patience and infrastructure to develop him properly. According to sources who've studied Mendoza's tape extensively and who've compared his skill set to successful NFL quarterbacks, he has all the tools to become a Pro Bowl level starter if he lands in the right situation with the right coaching and the right supporting cast. But according to these same sources, Mendoza also has the profile of a quarterback who could completely bust if he's thrown into a bad situation too early, forced to play behind a weak offensive line, or coached by someone who doesn't understand how to maximize his specific strengths. And the most fascinating part of the Mendoza evaluation, according to sources who've been tracking how teams view him, is that there's one team that's emerged as the perfect landing spot for him. A team that nobody has publicly connected to Mendoza, but that has all the pieces in place to turn him into the next great pocket passer, the New England Patriots, who are quietly positioning themselves to draft Mendoza and to build their next dynasty around him. The debate about Fernando Mendoza's NFL future and whether he'll be a star has intensified dramatically over the past week, according to sources who've monitored how teams are discussing him internally, as more scouts and coaches have done deep dives on his tape and have tried to project how his college success and his pre-draft workout performances will translate to the professional level. According to sources who've been part of these evaluation sessions, the discussions about Mendoza tend to follow a similar pattern. Everyone agrees he has legitimate NFL caliber, arm talent, and decision-making ability. But there's significant disagreement about whether his ceiling is high enough to justify drafting him in the first round versus waiting and taking him in the second or third round as a developmental prospect. According to sources who've studied the history of quarterback development in the NFL, Mendoza fits the profile of what scouts call a system quarterback, which in this context isn't a negative term, but rather a description of a player whose success depends heavily on being in an offensive scheme that maximizes his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. According to sources, Mendoza's strengths include excellent accuracy on short and intermediate routes, quick processing of defensive coverages, good pocket presence and movement, and strong leadership and communication skills. But according to sources, his weaknesses include below-average arm strength compared to elite NFL quarterbacks, limited mobility as a scrambler or designed runner, and a tendency to play too conservatively in situations where aggressiveness might be necessary. That profile, according to sources who've analyzed quarterback archetypes, is very similar to quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, and even Tom Brady in certain respects, all of whom have had successful NFL careers by being smart, accurate, and consistent rather than by being physically elite. According to sources, if Mendoza lands with a team that values those qualities and that builds an offensive system around timing routes, quick decisions, and play-action concepts that work off a strong running game, he could absolutely become a star. But according to sources, if Mendoza lands with a team that wants him to be a downfield gunslinger or a dual-threat playmaker, he'll struggle because those aren't his natural strengths. The evaluation of Mendoza's arm strength is particularly interesting and nuanced according to sources who've broken down his throwing mechanics. According to sources, Mendoza doesn't have a weak arm in absolute terms. He can make all the throws that NFL offenses require, including deep posts and sideline comebacks. But according to sources, his arm strength is on the lower end of what you typically see from successful NFL starters, which means he doesn't have the velocity to consistently drive the ball into tight windows against elite NFL defensive backs the way quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen can. According to sources, that limitation doesn't mean Mendoza can't succeed. But it does mean he needs to be even more accurate and anticipatory with his throws than quarterbacks with stronger arms. Because he can't afford to be late or to throw into contested situations where velocity can overcome positioning. The teams that are most interested in Fernando Mendoza, according to sources who've tracked which organizations have done the most extensive work on him, tend to be teams with established offensive systems and experienced coaching staffs that can develop quarterbacks gradually without forcing them to carry the offense immediately. According to sources, that includes teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who've expressed interest in Mendoza as someone who could sit behind Russell Wilson for a year or two and learn before taking over. The Los Angeles Rams, who view Mendoza as a potential heir to Matthew Stafford. And, most significantly, according to sources, the New England Patriots, who multiple sources say have done more pre-draft work on Mendoza than any other team in the league. The Patriots' interest in Fernando Mendoza makes enormous sense according to sources who understand New England's organizational philosophy and their quarterback history. According to sources, the Patriots have always valued accuracy, decision-making, and football IQ over raw, physical tools at the quarterback position, which is why they've succeeded with quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Mac Jones, who weren't elite athletes, but who were excellent processors and executors of the offensive system. According to sources, Mendoza fits that mold perfectly. And the Patriots' offensive system under their current coaching staff, which emphasizes timing routes, quick throws, and play-action concepts, is almost ideal for maximizing what Mendoza does well while minimizing what he doesn't do as well. But according to sources familiar with New England's draft positioning and strategy, the Patriots face a challenge in actually acquiring Mendoza because they're picking in the mid-teens of the first round. And there's growing concern that Mendoza might be gone by the time their pick comes up, given how his draft stock has risen over the past few weeks. According to sources, the Patriots have been exploring trade-up scenarios where they could move into the top 10 to secure Mendoza if they believe he's the right quarterback for their future. And according to sources, one potential trade scenario that's been discussed involves the Patriots trading with the Chicago Bears, who pick 7th overall and who might be willing to trade down if they can acquire additional assets while still having access to the players they want. The projection of Fernando Mendoza's career trajectory if he lands with the Patriots or a similar well-coached team is cautiously optimistic, according to sources who've studied comparable quarterback prospects from previous drafts. According to sources, the most likely outcome for Mendoza is that he becomes a solid starter who makes the Pro Bowl occasionally, wins more games than he loses, and provides stability at the most important position without ever quite becoming a true superstar, who carries his team to championships through individual brilliance. According to sources, that's a very valuable player to have and absolutely worth a first-round pick if the team builds properly around him. But it's also important to have realistic expectations about his ceiling rather than projecting him to become the next elite franchise quarterback. The risk scenario for Fernando Mendoza, according to sources who've identified the factors that could cause his NFL career to fail, involves him being drafted by a team that's impatient, that has organizational dysfunction, or that doesn't have the offensive line and supporting cast necessary for a timing-based quarterback to succeed. According to sources, if Mendoza gets drafted by a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, who are known for instability and for cycling through quarterbacks quickly, or by a team like the Tennessee Titans, who don't currently have the offensive infrastructure to protect and support a developing quarterback, his career could stall before. According to sources who've studied quarterback success rates in the NFL, the single biggest predictor of whether a quarterback prospect becomes a star isn't actually talent or measurables. It's landing spot and supporting cast. According to sources, quarterbacks who get drafted by teams with good offensive lines, quality weapons, and experienced coaching staffs succeed at dramatically higher rates than quarterbacks who get drafted by teams lacking those elements, regardless of the individual player's talent level. And according to sources, Fernando Mendoza's entire career trajectory will likely be determined in the moment when his name gets called on draft day and the hat he puts on reveals which organization will be responsible for his development. The intangibles that scouts and coaches emphasize when discussing Fernando Mendoza are consistently positive, according to sources who've interviewed coaches and teammates who've worked with him. According to sources, everyone who's been around Mendoza talks about his work ethic, his leadership ability, his football IQ, and his coachability. According to sources, those qualities matter enormously in the NFL because the learning curve from college to the pros is steep, and quarterbacks who are smart and willing to work can often overcome physical limitations through preparation and execution. According to sources, Mendoza checks all those boxes, which is why even scouts who have concerns about his arm strength still believe he'll have a successful NFL career if he lands in the right situation. The one wild card factor in Fernando Mendoza's NFL future, according to sources who've studied quarterback development, is health and durability. According to sources, Mendoza has been remarkably healthy throughout his college career with no significant injury history. But he's also a quarterback who operates primarily from the pocket and who takes hits when protections break down. According to sources, if Mendoza can stay healthy throughout his NFL career, his chances of becoming a star increase significantly because he'll have the opportunity to develop and improve year over year. But according to sources, if Mendoza suffers a major injury early in his career, particularly an injury that affects his throwing arm or shoulder, it could derail his development because quarterbacks with marginal arm strength can't afford to lose any velocity or mechanics due to injury as of now. Thursday, February 27, 2026, Fernando Mendoza's NFL future remains uncertain in the sense that nobody knows which team will draft him or what situation he'll land in. But what's becoming increasingly clear, according to sources who've evaluated him thoroughly, is that he has genuine star potential if he lands with the right organization that values what he does well and that has the patience and infrastructure to develop him properly. The New England Patriots appear to be the team best positioned to maximize Mendoza's potential. And if they're able to trade up and select him, sources believe there's a very real possibility that Mendoza could become the next great Patriots quarterback and could help them build a new dynasty. But if Mendoza falls to a less stable organization or gets thrust into a starting role before he's ready, his career could go in a completely different direction. The next 2 months leading up to the draft will determine everything. Fernando Mendoza's NFL future depends entirely on landing spot. He has the tools to become a Pro Bowl starter like Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan if he lands with the right team, particularly the Patriots, who've done more work on him than anyone. But he could bust if drafted by a dysfunctional team or forced to play too early. His ceiling is solid starter who occasionally reaches star level. His floor is respectable backup. The draft day hat he wears will determine everything.